Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hi, Dana.
We didn't start laughing before we went on.
No, because we're talking about things that piss us off.
Yep, that's true. And your dog ate your breakfast when you turned
Oh,
around.
for those of you that
So
listen to the
Gwen's
show
dog ate her
regularly,
breakfast, and yesterday my dog, unbeknownst to me, jetted out the front door when we got a package, only for me to find out when the Amazon driver, bless his heart, I have to find him and hug him, said,
yeah.
"I think I have your dog," and it didn't even register, and I'm like, "Oh my god, yeah,"
So
which is a
Amazon
good
not
lead
only
into
delivers packages, but also your dog.
puppies. Yeah, I don't know how he knew it was our. Maybe he saw her run out, but it's a good way to introduce the topic of dissonance. Because for about it felt like for like 30 seconds, I was looking at him and looking at the dog, and it didn't fit. Like I was like, "Wow, that dog looks a lot like our dog."
That sure looks like Charlie.
That's a man. What is the Amazon man doing here with our dog? I mean, it was all probably in a split second, but I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's Charlie. And then I'm like, what the hell? How did that? Yeah, yeah, it didn't, I couldn't, it didn't fit my frame, which is a really
Yeah,
good
yeah,
segue into kind of, I think some of the part and parcel of the disconnect between neurodivergent thinking and not. I mean, isn't it really a dissonance thing? Like one person's thinking one thing, one person's thinking another, and they don't fit,
yeah,
right? When we're talking about like internal dissonance, it might be something you feel, really feel like it's true to you, and you try to kind of put on a different face. Like I was always, as a little kid, when it came to my birthday, I was a lunatic. Like I couldn't wait. I wanted my birthday. I wanted presents to come, like a lot of little kids are. And when I would get something that I was disappointed by, I had a really hard time hiding it, right?
yeah,
So be sort of like, and then you have to learn, right, as a kid, like, well, that's not polite, and you have to say thank you, and but the disconnect between what was really going on and what I wanted to say was just huge, right? So
yeah,
dissonance is really what's going on internally for you, really, and maybe a dissonance is really sort of like a version of cognitive masking. You're trying to hold these two things in your brain at one time, and they're opposed to each other. They don't really fit together, and then you have to figure out how to reconcile those, and we'll do that in therapy, right? This idea of
yeah.
cognitive dissonance. um, Adler talked about, which I thought was really astute of him, that he called something, basically called personality, something called lifestyle, which is basically like how you see the world, yourself, and other people. And he would say that you would have a lifestyle conviction, like something like, I can't trust men, let's say, to use a global one. And then you would look for things in your environment that prove that correct, because humans want to be right. I mean, that's a totally normal thing, right? So if on one hand I have this really nice dude over here who's not a man who's bad, and I have one over here who is, if my lifestyle conviction is men can't be trusted, I'm going to focus more on the one who's bad and say, see, this affirms my belief. To have someone who's a good guy doesn't fit with my lifestyle conviction, and then there's some dissonance there. Like, how do I reconcile this? So
Hmm.
then you see things like that you're unconscious of, like, I'm going to push that person away, or I'm going to try to find flaws in that person, right? To make my internal frame fit. So then I'll, oh, I used to like this person, and now when I hear them breathing, I want to murder them in their sleep, right? So there'll be things like that you'll figure out a way to skew it to fit with your, we could say, cognitive schemas, but he didn't use that CBT language, but borrowing a little bit from CBT.
Yeah,
So how do you reconcile those things that don't sort of fit? And that's a lot of grist for the mill for us for therapy, when you have that
yeah.
dissonance if something doesn't fit together, right? Um, a lot of these things you're not even aware of; they're just sort of
I was,
operating in the background. Yeah,
yeah, I was just about to say that. Like, this isn't always conscious.
right.
This
Right.
is to resolve dissonance is a
Mhm.
very instinctual, reflexive, natural thing that we strive to
Mm.
do. And it's why it's important to take moments to look at oneself
Yeah. Yeah.
because yeah, hello. Um, Echo chambers, right?
Mhm.
When you only listen to the same thing. I mean, this is why social media I think can be
Yeah.
dangerous in many ways, right? It's going to pick up what you're
Yeah.
kind of looking for. It's not going to give you any kind of
Exactly. Exactly.
alternative
Yeah.
types of opinions or perspectives. Um, but in order for you to catch your dissonance and to do something about it, because we all have dissonance, everyone has dissonance, by the way. There's
Yes.
dissonance
It's a
everywhere.
totally new thing. Yep. Yep.
Normal thing. Um,
Mhm.
we do need to sit and have a frame to understand our dissonance and how it
Yeah.
might impact our decisions and behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. And it can't,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not always a bad thing. It can be like if
Yeah.
I was raised to be grateful for getting a gift from somebody, and I might have to force it a little bit, say, "Oh, thank you." But as you develop and as you empower yourself around that, then maybe you find a different. So you're not just faking it, right? Like if someone gives me, my dad's wife used to for years try to buy me clothes, and I'm like, just don't. Your taste is so far from anything I would ever fathom even touching, let alone putting on my body. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
And but she'd keep doing it. And I'm like, all right, I know I'm supposed to be gracious and so on. And so the frame that I had to switch to wasn't, I would get stuck in the why doesn't she listen to me? Right. And the frame I had to shift that dissonance to was she's trying. But we hear these phrases like it's the thought that counts. And it's true. So you would say, she actually went to that length. She keeps trying. She's not listening to me, but she keeps trying. And then
Yeah.
she finally just stopped buying anything, which was perfect. But
Yeah.
it may be that you just have to alter your frame so you're not living so much in that dissonance and feeling like, God, why? You get really worked up if someone's doing that, right?
Yep.
Like typically with people that are closer to us, I still do it with my dad, right? I've done so much work to let go of and not get triggered by that. And then this week, and my poor wife is like, I don't understand why you keep doing this. And I'm like, it's that damn dissonance. Because there's this tiny seed inside of me that's like, it could happen, or is in denial or whatever it is. And it's like, there it is again.
Yeah.
Do I realize it way sooner? Yes, absolutely. When I was younger, in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I would spin for days on things like that. And it was just a matter of minutes this time. So you can get to where you can change those things and be aware of some of those um, disparities. But people will run into this, for example, with friends or like at work. If you're being asked to do something and it doesn't align with your value set, for example, we describe that as dissonance, right? Well, they're
Yep.
asking me to do this thing that my family really taught me isn't right, or something along those lines, or those can be forms of dissonance as well too. So it's a malalignment between your internal self or your true self or what you've learned and what's out there, right? And so, yeah, a lot of therapy is to unpack the layers of that, right?
Yep.
What is it in me that still gets pissed off when I get yet another hook thing from my dad? It's like I would love to be able to just let it go completely, but clearly there's something still there. And part of it is just something like a parent is hard to 100% let go of. And
Yeah.
I have done this at various points in my life. I work with clients that we say, you just need to have no connection, right?
Yep.
Um, and that is a thing that sometimes people have to do. And I've done that for periods of time, but all the way to just saying, have you tried talking with your spouse and just saying, this doesn't fit with me? And then they do that. And the spouse is like, oh, yeah, okay. So it doesn't have to be a big deal either to deal with it. It can be just a quick conversation. But I think neurodivergence, especially, experience a lot of this because we're moving through a world that wasn't made for us. So there's constantly that sense of not fitting or not
Yes.
being seen in a way that feels genuine, right? Yeah.
Yes. Or that the masking, there's so much masking that has to
Yeah.
make up for the dissonance that
Right.
that leaves people exhausted and fatigued.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you
Exactly.
know, this also reminds me of the old 12-step mantra, focus on what you can
Uh-huh.
control, let go of the things that you can't, this
Yeah.
kind of idea,
Yeah.
right? Which is really wise.
Yeah.
because to be able to put your energy to consistently or continually put your energy into something that you can't control is extremely frustrating,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
especially chronically. That's extremely frustrating. You can see how that you
Yeah.
could get enraged by it. And then, that's going to turn into helplessness and hopelessness at some point. Like that,
Yeah.
like that's just the trajectory of that kind of thing, right? It reminds you of like narcissists. Like, how do you deal with
Yeah.
narcissists? You try not to at all. Like that's,
Yeah.
that's really the
And
name of the
yeah,
game.
and I love the sort of growing awareness of these kinds of things because we see language showing up in our lexicon that speaks to that. Like
Yeah.
they're living rent free in your head. I remember the first time I heard
Mm,
that phrase, I was like, oh, that's such a good phrase because it
such a
sort of
good phrase.
reminds you, like, oh crap, I'm letting them do, sort of like we're talking about, I'm giving my power away, I'm letting them do that. And then how can I not do that? Right. For
Yeah.
me, guilt is a big
Yeah.
thing.
Me too.
You can just go into that. Oh, I'm a bad person. Look what I'm doing. I
How
shouldn't be
dare
that
you?
way. How dare you?
How
Yeah,
dare you? What right do you think you
yeah,
have? You think you're better than this person?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Why
yeah,
do you think you deserve that over someone else?
yeah, yeah.
Stop being a diva. Stop being a, right? We could go on and on
Well,
about
and
the
the
narrative.
furthest thing from yeah, yeah, but things like the convention that I was at this weekend, I'm sure that there were things that everybody else around me was doing that I was like, I could do that. I could mask through that, but I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, oh, do I really want to do that? No, not so much. Right. But I think that as you're developing, and if you're in your teens or early 20s or even 30s, these are some big, heavy lifting pieces to do. Right.
Yeah,
Not so easy as just saying, oh, I'm just going to live for myself. And um, people we know and that we're connected with, and all these other things like, that go through your head. Should I do that? This has bearing on me as at work, and I have an incredibly internalized hard work ethic. And what does this mean if I don't get every possible CE credit that I can? And what does that mean? And so those kinds of things can really drive you in a way that isn't good for you.
yeah,
And you have to find that place of safety that you can kind of live with. Uh, so dissonance isn't cured by out there. It's not by manipulating your environment. It's about changing your view, right? There's a great line in a Imagine Dragons song. It's about therapy because he's singing about therapy. And he says, the therapist is helping him, and he says, where to point my view. And I love that line because it is sort of like pointing your view is about a lot of what we've talked about, which is
yeah,
saying, how do I see this? What do I look at? What's important? What's salient? What isn't? And having some choice over that. And I'm going to
yeah,
decide sort of where I point, right? That sense of that, knowing that in the environment, you're always going to have things you can't control, right? I love the fact that I did wear my loops the entire time that I was there at the convention. And every one of my neurodivergent students noticed. They were all like, "Oh, are those loops?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm wearing them at an APA thing for the first time." They're like, "Oh," and one dug into her backpack and got hers out and put them in, which was awesome because it was like permission for her. Well, if Dana's doing it, I can do it, right? That's
yeah.
that weird like. I know I want to do this to take care of myself sensorily, but the dissonance is, what are they going to think of me if I have these in, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about with dissonance. It's constantly sort of shaping and moving and whipping you.
Yeah.
And if you become aware of some of those things that you're doing that aren't congruent, we've done an episode on that. Some of that is a good way to find your way back of what really fits for you, what is congruent for you, right?
Yeah. And if the balance is too off to meet the environment, you
Mm-hmm.
got to question if the environment's right for you, and
Yeah,
it could be all the variables of that. It could be not just where, but how long. Um,
yeah,
it could be never, it could be for a moment, it could be, something that I talk a lot about with my clients is like, what's your escape plan? Like anytime we
yeah,
go into like work or the community or the other, outside of our protected spaces, like, what's your escape
mm-hmm.
plan? And that
Yeah,
really, I think, does help people know, oh, I have permission and I can leave this. Like,
yeah,
I can
yeah,
check in with myself and
Yep.
say enough. Or I can check in
Yep.
with myself and say, oh, actually it's
Mhm.
not as bad as I thought, or whatever it is
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
moment, because
Yep.
that's a moving target as well. We've spoken about systemic or allostatic loads, right? Where
Yep.
one day you just might be more fatigued than another for lots of different
Right.
reasons, for lots of different mechanisms that are happening. And, you know, one day that could be easier for you than another. And that's not because you're weaker or because you don't have as much willpower, or you haven't
Mhm.
put your mind to it enough. It's that you're tired or you're fatigued, and some of those things aren't
Mhm.
necessarily felt. I will say, especially for some of my clients that have a difficult time with hunger
Yeah.
signals, fatigue
Oh,
signals,
yeah.
these types of things. Like we don't have, we're kind of disconnected from that. We haven't really created
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
used a framework for how to check in with ourselves, right? But I
Yep.
love what you said, Dana, which is the encouragement here is to feel empowered
Yeah.
in the process, that you make the choice, you
Yeah.
make the decision, that it's not just
Yeah.
something that happens unconsciously, reflexively, without kind of you being in the driver's seat of it. So
Yeah.
even if the
Yeah.
outcome's the same, like let's say you still left early, you
Yeah.
made the choice to leave early.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it was in the realm of self-care as well, feeling that sense of panic of at the burnout and like I need to leave. And then
Yeah.
things that contributed to that, like I wanted my hometown to have a kick-ass experience, but there was nowhere to sit in the common areas, which I thought, oh, that's weird. Last year when I was in DC, like between all the doors, there was always one of those little bench things. It was really hard to get snacks and drinks for stuff. You had to go like there only one floor had them, and it was kind of a pain. Um, and those things contribute to that. I brought some of my own the next day, but then you're having to carry that around everywhere. And it's like, do I want to walk around with a cooler? What do I, you know? So
Yeah.
those sorts of things really do sort of feed into that. When we talk about self care, we're really talking about what do you need to help you get through a world that is not neurodivergent, right?
Yeah.
It's similar to uh, someone I know who uses a wheelchair and needs a ramp. It's similar to that in terms of the real barriers that are there. And then what do you need to do for yourself, knowing how you operate to meet those needs? You mentioned about like not being aware of being hungry or something like that.
Hmm.
And then it occurred to me that, yeah, everybody thinks it's so weird that my family ate dinner at 7:30 at night. I mean, it's sort of a European thing, but so my dad didn't get home till later. And I just remember between like 5 and 7:30, I was so hungry and we weren't allowed to eat anything. So probably even got, further conditioning to ignore that, right?
Yeah.
So that sense of until it's too late and then you're like all crabby and you don't know what's going on. And that sense of needing to have access to that and so on. And the looks you get, right? I had
Yeah.
been at a meeting at work a couple days before that convention, and my workmates all know I have my own food for stuff because I can't do gluten and I have some other sensitivities. And I could see the looks when I took out this funky looking protein bar that I had. You just always, everybody, and then like people aren't like, oh, what's that? They're like, what's that? Just those sorts of things that you're always gonna
And
like, really?
did you say Nunya?
What?
What's that? Nunya. Nunya business. That's what it
None your
is.
business. What I should say is, what do
Nunya.
you have? What are you eating? What do you have? Yeah. And those are things I hear from people all the time, like that they're sick of that, and then they're just gonna sort of go along. And you can go along, but make sure that you plan recovery time and that kind of thing if you're going to do
Yeah.
that. And yes, it is exhausting, and it is hard to live congruently and to pay attention to those dissonance pieces, but they're so vital to being okay, right? To feeling
They're
okay.
informative. I mean, maybe that's like
Mhm.
another way, another way for us to even frame dissonance is it's
Yeah.
information. It's
Yeah.
information that you're getting from yourself to say, "Hey, something's off." And
Yeah.
you need maybe point your attention over here, right? So that same idea of where's your view, like what are you looking at,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Where
Right.
are you where are you paying your attention? And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like that dissonance is like a little tap on the shoulder, like, hey,
Yeah.
hello, it's just that little
Yeah.
voice,
Totally.
right? That's saying,
Yep.
just take a
Yep.
moment. I do think it is difficult. And I think autistics get a really bad rap for, a lot of people mistakenly think, oh, autistics don't know how to read social cues, and they don't
Oh,
perceive
yeah.
emotions. And I really, in the time that I've been supporting this community, I actually think it's like the very opposite. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
they're very, many of them are empaths. They feel emotions
Mhm.
deeply and
Mhm.
bigly, right?
Mhm.
And that they're actually quite vigilant to
Yeah.
cues, so much so that they're having some decision paralysis,
Yeah.
because they've computed 50 different outcomes to this and they can't make a choice, and then now they're exhausted and now they're irritated,
Yeah.
and I mean,
Right.
that's what I'm
Mhm.
seeing more of than the,
Yeah.
they just don't know, they don't register, they don't know how to do it.
Right.
I'm really seeing the
Exactly.
opposite. And so,
Yep.
it is a challenging place. And that, again, we've spoken about this too, just because the advocacy burden falls on the person is
Right.
another layer on top of
Right.
being in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. That's
It's
right.
it's more energy to advocate and,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, tolerate maybe the snide comment or the nasty look
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever that is,
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
It sucks, but
dissonance.
yep.
Oh,
Exactly.
dissonance. Oh,
I got
dissonance.
to remember that. What'd you say? Was it what? Nunyo? It's
Nunya.
Nunyo.
Nunya.
I like that.
You could be like, you'd be like, what's that? It's Nunya. What's Nunya?
It's Nunya.
Nunya
Yeah.
business. That's what you say.
Yeah.
What is that other one? It's this. Oh no, that's in regards to conversation. What are you guys
Uh,
talking about? It's an A and B.
oh,
A and B
Nunya.
what? It's an what? It's an A B conversation. So see yourself out of it. I don't know, something like that.
Oh, that's a good
But
one. That's a good
Nunya.
one. Yeah.
That's what we do in my family.
I
In
like
my
that.
family,
I
we're
like that.
like, that's Nunya. Nunya
Nunya.
business. Nunya.
I love it. That's great. See
It's
all
just
these
a
little
fun.
language things that are
It's just a
evolving that
fun
are,
way. It's like a fun way to say,
yeah.
hey, like, get out. Like,
Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, but that was a common thing we used to say to my daughter, who's like, what are you guys talking about? What do you
Nunya.
have?
Yeah.
Now we don't do that. I mean, now it's just a joke, but she would
Yeah.
never say
Yeah.
anything. And then she, like, 2 days later, she'd ask us a question about a private conversation that we had that we didn't think that she heard. And
Oh.
we're like, oh, that's Nunya. That's where
Oh,
the Nunya
yeah.
came from. Stinker.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't underestimate your children, is all I'm going to
That's
say.
right. That's right.
Don't
Or your
underestimate
dog,
your children or
for
your
that
dog.
matter.
I am trying to practice. They say that you've healed from something when it doesn't bother you. Like,
Yeah.
when you don't get irritated or upset or hot about it, like, you've really,
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
integrated the information and you've really like,
I
you've
haven't I
done your
haven't
work.
gotten there with my dad yet.
I
Yeah,
haven't
clearly.
either.
Not
I
there
haven't gotten there with
yet.
my dog. I haven't gotten there with my, like, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, like, I cognitively understand.
Yeah, up here, totally get it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the heart doesn't always work in that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
welcome to
Yeah. Yeah.
humanity. Here we go.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
well, y'all, have
Let us
fun
know your
noticing your
thoughts on
dissonance.
yeah. Next time you're sitting there in a meeting and you really have to pee and you're trying to say it's a bad time to leave the room, remember this dissonance talk and say, screw that, I'm leaving, and get up
Yeah,
and go to bed. Yeah.
100%. Or maybe in the
Yeah.
comments, if you want to leave something fun,
Yeah.
what is your fun ways of getting people to mind their own
Yeah.
business?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would be that
Exactly.
would be great. If you have any other nunyas, I'd love to know.
What
I'd
are
love
your
to add to
nunyas?
my
Yeah, I like
nunya
it. Yeah.
repertoire.
That's
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well,
Bye,
we'll see you in the
everybody.
next episode. Bye.